should have turned this on already. I didn't. Come on, come on, come on. Here it comes. You're not filming now, are you?
I am right now.
You're filming already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now we can start.
We'll be doing some editing, apparently. Alright. We are going to finish talking about Chapter 12. If you recall, we left off with Thor, Loki, Thialfi, and Roskva, or Roskva, in the kingdom of Utgard, where they are challenged by the Jotun king. He challenges them to do something better than what? What does everybody in his kingdom have to do? Yes?
They have to be like better than someone else.
They have to be better than everybody else at it. So, Loki immediately speaks up and says he can eat more than anybody else. So, Loki challenges with an eating contest. This is kind of against, in previous stories, Thor could eat more than anybody. In this, though, Loki's the one with the huge appetite. So, Loki challenges to an eating contest. He is going to be eating against a giant whose name, oddly enough, is Logi. And yes, it sounds like his name for an important reason. They are eating what? What do they have to eat? Oh, yes. Meat, oxen, whole roast oxes are laid out nose to tail across the floor on wooden trenchers. They start eating at each end, they eat toward the center. They both get to the center at the same time, but who is declared the winner? Yes?
Loki, because he's eating the bones.
He not only ate the bones, but he ate the trencher too. He ate the plate out from under the meat. So, Logi wins. Alright, Thialfi is apparently one of the fastest runners in all the 9 worlds. Even though he's supposed to be just a human mortal, he's extremely fast. And so he's going to have a running race against a giant named Hugi. And that should sound familiar to you because of something we talked about much earlier on our Odin page. We'll get to it, I promise. Thialfi runs 3 heats. Remember, there's all this 3 parallelism, 3 challenges. And here, 3 times Thialfi runs against Hugi, and each time Hugi beats him by a bigger margin, even though Thialfi's running faster. He runs faster and faster, and still Hugi beats him by a greater and greater margin. It's ridiculous. So Hugi wins. Now here is that missing story I was telling you about. Right here, this would be a perfect place for Roskva's story. But we don't have a story about her. She's apparently just, sewing the clothes, doing the mending, wiping their little boy chins. I don't know. It's horrible that the Norse have lost her entire story. So, no Roskva. The Thor challenges. Thor is going to face 3 different challenges. Sir?
Oh, I was going to say what one of his challenges was.
What is his first challenge?
He has to drink mead out of a gourd. A horn.
A drinking horn.
Yeah.
We're talking about the kind of... one of my props is missing. Shoot. Oh, no, there it is. This is a drinking horn.
Yeah, like
the
that.
idea here is the Jotun king's horn. So we're just going to call it the Jotun horn. Is this gigantic ox horn. And they hand it to Thor and say, yes, only the bravest among us can drink this in one draught. So, this is the drinking contest. We're drinking mead. And Thor lifts it, and how many times does he try to drink the horn dry? Yes? 3 times he tries, because they keep saying, whoa, all of us, they say, oh, don't worry about it. Many of us can't do it in one try again. So Thor drinks hugely a second time, and he can't drain it. And then he tries the 3rd time, and they kind of laugh at him that he can't drain the horn in 3 tries. They say, that's, okay, thought you were a drinker. Now, the second challenge. What is the second challenge that he faces? What's all of it?
He has to lift up a keg.
he's got to have he says, I can lift anything. So the second challenge is lifting. The Jotun king brings in his cat, this monstrous, gigantic cat. I don't know what it is about the Norse and cats. We'll call it the Jotun cat. Number 1 is the Jotun horn. Number 2 is the Jotun cat. And what happens? Yes?
He's able to lift, like, the paw, or he's
Only on the 3rd try. And that's after he does what?
strengthens his
He tightens his belt so that he can, yes?
How big is this cat?
Well, in some drawings, I don't actually have a good drawing here. It's a big enough cat, it's bigger than a mountain lion. So when Thor finally tightens his belt so that he can barely breathe, he manages to get one paw off the ground. The cat keeps arching its back further and further up, and he can't lift the cat off the ground. And he finally gets one paw off and then gives up. Oh. Finally, he's really angry. What is his 3rd challenge? What does he say he is going to do for the 3rd challenge? Come on. Someone has answered one yet today. All right, go ahead.
Doesn't he have to wrestle an old woman?
Yes, a wrestling contest. So the first one was drinking, the 3rd one was lifting, the last one, which I'm spelling wrong, is wrestling. And none of the giants will wrestle him. They say, we're afraid we're going to hurt you, you little guy. And the Jotun king calls to the kitchens and brings in the Jotun granny, his grandmother. The grandmother of the Jotun king comes in. Her name, by the way, is Ellie. And this would have been a clue to the Norse. It would have been kind of a pun, kind of a joke. But the idea here, Thor, they brought in an old woman for Thor to wrestle, and he rages against this. He says, I can't wrestle an old woman. This is ridiculous. I refuse to wrestle an old woman. And what does the old woman say to him? She starts to trash talk him. She's like, oh, poor little Thor. He is so afraid of wrestling an old woman. I thought you had game. So she basically shames him into a furious rage. He begins to wrestle with the old lady. And what happens? How does that come out? Thor versus the old woman. Yes?
old woman or wrestles.
Eventually, yeah. They strain for a long, long time. And finally, the old woman brings Thor down to one knee. She doesn't pin him, but going down to one knee is a loss in this kind of wrestling contest. So, the Jotun king beats Thor, the Jotun cat beats Thor, and the Jotun granny defeats Thor. And Thor is just so ashamed of himself, and everybody feels bad. They've been defeated. I mean, poor Roscoe lost the whole story. At this point, the Jotun king says, you guys can stay the night, but in the morning, I'm going to take you fragile little people to the edge of my kingdom and see you off. So, he does. They kind of walk out shamefaced, and they walk to the edge of his kingdom. And as the Jotun king closes the gates of his kingdom, he reveals the truth. Going all the way back to Skrymir. What did Thor learn about the giant Skrymir? Yes. He was the king in disguise. And they show Thor this mountain that has 3 huge craters in it. And that mountain with the huge 3 craters in it, he says, that's what you were hitting when you thought you were hitting Skrymir's head. Every time you brought Mjolnir down, I magically substituted that rock for Skrymir's head. That's why you thought you weren't doing any damage to Skrymir's head. But look what you were doing. The Jotun king now says to Thor, if I had had any idea how powerful you were, I never would have let you near my people at all. And we find the truth about these contests. All of this was just what? What were all of these contests? Yeah.
An illusion.
They were all just illusions. It was the power of suggestion, the power of illusion that fooled them. When Loki was running against Loki, what does Loki mean? What was Loki actually eating against in this contest? Yes?
Isn't it wildfire?
Wildfire. Loki is the god of fire. Logi is the embodiment of fire itself. So he was eating against fire. So of course he couldn't win. When Thialfi was running, I said you should recognize this. Does anyone recognize the name Hugin? Anyone? Yeah.
It's one of Odin's ravens.
It's one of Odin's ravens. Do you remember what it means?
Oh, I never.
It means thought. Thought and memory are Odin's ravens. Who can run faster than the speed of thought? Nobody. Thoughts move too quickly. So, that was a cheat. When Thor thought he was drinking mead out of this horn, what was he really attempting to do? Yeah.
He was attempting to drink the sea.
Yes. The horn magically, invisibly goes down into the sea, and Thor drained so much of the sea, he set up such fluctuations. This is the Norse explanation for what? What did he create?
Isn't it coming on the shore? Waves?
Not just the ordinary waves hitting the shore, because that's the daughters. Yes.
Isn't it tide?
The tides. What causes the tides in Greek mythology? Yeah.
Isn't it Poseidon's horses crashing onto the, well, not crashing, but riding up on
No, it's one of the monsters. It's one of the
Oh.
monsters. Saddlemeyer?
Isn't it Charybdis?
Charybdis. Again, Charybdis swallows the sea and spews it
Oh,
back
yeah.
out. Now here's Thor swallowing the sea. And even though Charybdis is sort of an ongoing force, and Thor only does this one time, supposedly that's what creates the fluctuation of the tides. Thor trying to drink the sea. Now when he thought he was lifting the Jotuncat, what was he really lifting? Yeah.
Jormungand?
He was pulling the Midgard serpent up out of the ocean. This was really the Midgard serpent. Incredible. The Midgard serpent is absolutely huge, and he did with that when he finally lifted the cat's paw off the ground. He actually got the monster up out of the sea and then dropped him. Splash. And it really made him angry as well. Alright, now when he's wrestling the Jotun granny, what does Ellie mean? What would be the joke to the Norse? Ooh, old age. Ellie means old age. So he was wrestling an embodiment of time. Think about that. Can anyone beat time? Not in the long run. Not even the Norse gods are immune to
Wait, where did
time.
Ellie come from?
Ellie, she was the Jotun granny.
Oh, that's her name.
Her name is Ellie.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
So even though I know
Idun's apples will roll back the clock, but it seems to be a cautionary tale that in the long run, time will get them. Okay, so whereas Heracles can wrestle death itself and beat it, and he was just a mortal, Thor is wrestling with time, and old age is going to get him in the end. He puts up a good fight. And the king compliments Thor. The Jotun king says to Thor, "You're amazing. I can't believe you accomplished what you accomplished." Thor is furious. Let me show you some pictures from the... here are the giants, the Jotun king. I like his expression here. He's looking on in kind of amazement. One of his advisors is like... and here's Thor trying to drink the Jotun horn dry. Yeah. This is more of the Jotunheim range in Norway. You can see how it kind of looks like castles. This peak is actually called Utgard. It's named after this story, or maybe this story is named after the peak. That is Utgard right there. Alright, that's the next story. So, at the end of this story, I don't have any pictures from this area of the book. At the end of this story, Thor is furious, but why can't he do anything about it? What happens at the very, very end of this story? Yes?
Doesn't the Jotunheim disappear?
The whole kingdom of Utgard, not Jotunheim because that's the world, but Utgard, the whole kingdom vanishes on them. And Thor, although he has his hammer and he's ready to use it, he has nothing to use it on. Thor is frustrated, but Loki, even though Loki lost, how does Loki feel? How does Loki feel about these events? Yeah.
Doesn't he find it humorous?
He is really tickled by the fact that Thor has been defeated and somewhat humbled. So, Loki's pleased by the way this turned out. Alright, The next chapter has to do with hospitality. We have a god of the shallow seas, Old Njord, but we also have a god of the deep ocean, the river ocean. He is called Aegir, and I know this is really confusing because these gods are called the Aesir, and now we have a guy called Aegir. He doesn't appear in most of the stories. He is rarely mentioned, but in this story we learn a lot about him. He is the god of the deep sea. His wife is Ran the Drowner. If you drown, you don't get to go to either Helheim or Valhalla. You go down to the bottom of the ocean where you have to serve Ran. She likes having servants. If you fall off your Viking ship in the middle of the sea, she's the one who makes sure you were pulled down and drowned. So, she's looked at kind of a scary way. He actually is about to become the god of hospitality, which is absolutely strange because of how incredibly grumpy he's supposed to be. The god of the deep sea, like who? Who would you compare the grumpiness to in Greek mythology? Sir?
Hades.
A little bit. Hades is very cold. That is true, but can you think of somebody associated with the deep seas, who maybe is not always in the best of moods? Sir?
Poseidon.
Poseidon. Poseidon's very moody. The problem here is that whereas Poseidon can be very jolly, he's changeable. Supposedly, Aegir is almost always in a bad mood. Yes?
So does his mood have to do with the water?
It's their perception of the deep sea. The Norse people found the sea a far more, although they had a lot to do with it, they didn't have as much good weather as you get in the Mediterranean. So they didn't see the sea as a particularly cheerful place most of the time. To them, the sea is almost always dangerous. It is embodied, the deep seas are embodied by Aegir. When you get out over the black water, they would call it, the blue water, that's the realm of Old Njord. The black water, that's this guy. And he is a grumpy pants. Now, he gets into this because the Aesir want him to host a party. They basically invite themselves to his house, and he says, I can't have you over. What's his excuse? Why can't he have the gods over? Shields.
He doesn't have a pot big enough to make mead.
Yeah, I don't have a kettle big enough to brew. Yeah, you guys drink a lot. I don't have a big enough kettle. One person speaks up and says, I know where we can get a kettle big enough. Who happens to know where we can get a big enough kettle? Yes.
Tyr's father.
Yeah, the father of Tyr. Tyr has a very interesting backstory. Probably shouldn't go here yet, but I'm going to because I need the space. The giant Hymir, he is a Jotun. And he is a big, strong, mean Jotun. He has apparently captured for himself an Aesir woman as his wife. Her name is Hrod. H-R-O-D, Hrod. And he, even though he's a giant, he is the father of Tyr the Brave. So Tyr has a giant parent. He is not like the giants because he favors his mother. But he is, and so he does not get along with his father. His mother, at a very early age, sends him off to Odin. Sends him off to become one of the Aesir. Which, of course, he does, and all is well. He becomes the god of victory and bravery, and he's initially the god of oath honor. He loses the oath honor when he loses his hand. Now, Tyr knows his father Hymir has a big enough mead kettle. Who's going to go with him? Who's going to go with him to help him on this dangerous mission? Yeah.
Thor.
Thor himself. Thor goes along on this trip. So Thor and Tyr are going to go to the house of Hymir and get his mead kettle somehow. They get to his house and they are given hospitality. It's sort of a grudging hospitality. It's kind of scary being in the giant's house. And Thor eats a whole bunch of food. This is one of those stories. Remember how Loki had the prodigious appetite in the previous chapter? In this story, Thor's the one who can eat everybody out of house and home. And rather ungraciously, what does Hymir insist that they have to do if they want to keep being fed? What are they going to do?
They have to go like fishing or get their own food.
Yeah, they have to get their own food. Now when Hymir goes fishing, he is a giant. He goes fishing for whole whales. But Thor is after bigger game. What does Thor use as bait? This is kind of a snapback at his host for not feeding them. What does he do? Shields.
He takes one of his giant oxen.
He takes the head of Hymir's prize oxen, an ox head. He baits a huge hook with it, and he insists they go out over the black water. They go out over the deep water. Why? What is Thor fishing for? Thor is after bigger game. What is it? The serpent. He hooks Jormungand. Here's a picture. Here's Hymir cowering in the background. This is Thor standing here rather boldly on the front of the ship. Very famous painting where he has hooked and pulled up Jormungand.
But could you eat him?
I think Thor is much more after the... No, you shouldn't eat him. He's poisonous.
Right.
No, Thor is after the challenge of fishing. And he is also calling Hymir a coward for not fishing in the deep water. This is why Hymir doesn't fish the deepest water, because he's afraid of the Midgard serpent. Here he is cowering in the back of the boat. Thor, it's hard to see in this picture, but he is raising Mjolnir. He is about to kill the Midgard serpent. I don't know if you can see this, but looking on from way up here in the corner is Odin. Odin is looking down from his throne on this scene. What does Odin know about the Midgard serpent? What? Yeah. He'll be part of Ragnarok. The Midgard serpent cannot die. What happens at this point that saves the Midgard serpent from being smashed by the hammer? It's like, oh my gosh, here's Thor about to change fate. What happens at that moment? Yes. Yes. Hymir rushes forward, severs the chain, and the monster escapes. Thor does throw Mjolnir after it. He hurls Mjolnir down, but it only glances off the monster's head. It hurts him, but it doesn't kill him. He settles back down onto the bottom, swallows his tail again, and he's quaking with anger and causing rumbles in the sea. Thor is so furious with Hymir. I think I've got another picture. This is a woodcut of a... Sorry, this is a drawing of a woodcut that shows Thor fishing. Here's the Midgard serpent chewing on himself down here. This interweaving pattern's kind of cool. Cut right to the chase there. They get back to shore by Thor lifting up not only the boat, but the giant and all the whales they've caught too, and they stomp back to shore. We have to have 3 challenges. Remember the storytelling rule of 3. So, Thor outfished Hymir. What's the next challenge Hymir gives him? When they get back home, Hymir requests something of him that seems ridiculous. What is it? Yeah.
Is it carry the kettle?
No, that's number 3. That's number 3, and that's how we're going to solve the whole quest. But he challenges him to break something, and it should be really easy. Remember what he challenges Thor to break? Yeah. A little cup. He hands him a little goblet and says, I'll bet you can't break this. So Thor tries to crush it, and he can't. He tightens his belt, and he throws it at the ground, and nothing. He takes out Mjolnir, and strikes the cup with Mjolnir, and the cup is still unbroken. Wow. What are you going to do to this thing? Somebody speaks up and gives Thor a hint. Who gives him a hint? Yes? Hrod, the mother of Tyr, tells him to do what?
Throw it Hymir's forehead.
The hardest substance in the world, Hymir's forehead. So, the cup smashes into Hymir's forehead and breaks into a million pieces, and Thor has won again. Yes?
Where did we set up the challenges or the quests that they had to do this?
Hymir is trying to shame his guests. He is not happy about having his son home, and he's sure not happy about having the giant killer Thor in the house. So these challenges are his way of being a rude host.
Does Thor know the three are coming?
No, it's just we're looking at it from the outside perspective, the rule of three.
Yeah.
So there have to be 3 challenges. So he defeats the first 2. The last challenge is fun. It's actually kind of a joke, because what does Hymir challenge Thor to do? This is what you were talking about. What was it?
To carry the meat kettle to a certain point and back.
Yeah, I'll bet you can't carry this meat kettle down to the crossroads and back. And Thor looks at Tyr, and Tyr looks at Thor, and he says, I'll bet you I can. So he picks up the mead kettle and starts walking. And we've established that Thor is really naive because he doesn't lie very well. But here, Thor's a little bit sneaky, because he gets to the crossroads with the kettle, and what does he just do? What does he do? What would you do, Lamani? He just keeps going. He's going to walk all the way back to Asgard with the thing. Now, eventually, Hymir figures it out. Eventually, Hymir goes, he took my mead kettle. And he and his Tyr's grandmother, which is this monstrous giant with 100 heads, that should sound familiar, by the way. He and all of his household come racing after Thor and Tyr, and Thor sets down the mead kettle, picks up the hammer, and kills them all. And it's kind of anticlimactic. We just kill all the giants. Yes?
Does Hrod die?
No, we free Hrod. Hrod comes back to Asgard. She's kind of rescued by this story. Another bit of chauvinism is they didn't think to rescue her until they ended up having to kill the giants anyway. But the good news is Tyr gets to take his mother back to Asgard.
Was she normal size?
Yeah, remember the size thing is kind of bizarre. Sometimes the gods seem very small compared to the giants, and sometimes, like in this story, they seem like they're about the same size. Okay? So, Aegir gets his mead kettle. Here is Aegir, and he becomes the god of hospitality, which is kind of bizarre, considering he was so grumpy now. But now, here he is with his mead kettle. Here are his 9 daughters. I think this is supposed to be his wife down here, Rod. The 9 daughters are filling the mead kettle and getting ready for the Feast of Aegir, which will be held every winter from now on. Every winter, the Feast of Aegir. And that is the end of that chapter. Pause.